The most beautiful woman at the party was the one nobody could place. She arrived late, in deep forest green, unhurried, wrapped in the kind of calm that money cannot buy and fear cannot fake, and heads turned the way heads always turn, but no one knew her name. The hostess herself came floating over, Bisola, queen of that glittering Lagos ballroom, celebrating 10 shining years of her marriage and her empire, diamonds at her throat, a practiced smile on her lips. She assumed the stranger in green was someone important she had simply forgotten.
Welcome,
Bisola said warmly, extending a hand heavy with gold.
forgive me, and have we met?
And the woman in green took that hand, and held it a moment longer than politeness allows, and smiled, and turned her face, just slightly, into the light of the great chandeliers, so that the fine, faint silver lines that traced one cheek and the line of her jaw caught the gold. Old scars, softened by years and by skill, carried without shame, but there, for anyone who knew to look. And she said, in a voice pitched low enough that only Bisola could catch it beneath the music,
We have. You gave me this face, Bisola, 10 years ago. I have come a very long way tonight, to thank you for it.
"And my people, I want you to hear the exact sound this story opens on. It is the sound of a champagne glass slipping out of a woman's fingers and bursting on a marble floor, because that is the sound a stolen past makes when it walks back through the door, alive, whole, unafraid, into the house of the woman who was certain, 10 years ago, that she had burned it down to ash. My people, come closer, sit down, because this is a story that will make some of you weep and some of you burn, and I need you to hear all of it. The wound and the healing both, before you decide which. For before we can understand a woman returning in green to a ballroom, we must go back to a girl who was beautiful in the ordinary, honest way, and to the 3 who could not forgive her for it, and to the fire that was meant to erase her from the earth. Her name was Amaka, everyone called her. And I want you to hold what her name means, because this whole story turns on it. Amaka.
God is beautiful.
Her mother had looked at her newborn face and spoken that over her like a blessing, and it had proven true in the plain, unremarkable way most of us are beautiful before the world teaches us we are not. Amaka was not rich. She was not powerful. She was a warm-faced young woman with a wide, open smile and a laugh you could find across a crowded market, who sold fabric in her aunt's little shop and dreamed the small, decent dreams of an ordinary girl. A good man, a home, children, work she was proud of. She had a gift for making people feel seen. Old women saved their gossip for her. Children followed her. She was, in the truest sense, lovely, and she carried it lightly, the way you carry a thing you have never once thought to be afraid of losing. Let me give you one afternoon from that fabric shop, my people, so you know exactly the soul the fire would later fail to touch. A young woman came in once, a bride with almost no money, hunching with shame at the cheap cloth that was all she could afford for her own wedding, trying not to cry in front of the fine bolts she could only look at. And Amaka, this is the Amaka that existed before Bisola, the one worth remembering. Amaka did not sell her the cheap cloth. She reached up and took down one of the good bolts, the beautiful one, and she measured it out, and she named a price so small it was plainly a gift, and she waved off the girls stammering with a laugh, and she said,
A bride is not what she can afford. A bride is how she is loved. Now let me make you beautiful for a man who already thinks you are.
And she sent that girl out glowing, married weeks later in cloth fit for a queen, never once made to feel small. That was Amaka. She could not walk past a person made small without lifting them. Remember that afternoon, my people. Remember the girl in the good cloth, because it is going to matter more than you can yet imagine. And then 2 things happened to Amaka in the same season. The first is that a man began to look at her, and the second is that 3 women began to hate her for it. The man was Ikenna, and you must understand what Ikenna was in that world, because it explains everything that came after. Ikenna was the prize, the son of a wealthy, respected family, a young doctor with kind eyes and a soft voice, handsome in the effortless way, the man every ambitious family in that circle had quietly marked for their daughter. He was the future everyone wanted a piece of. And Ikenna, who could have had any polished, glittering socialite in the city, found himself crossing the market again and again to buy fabric he did not need, just to stand for 10 minutes in the warmth of a fabric seller's laugh. He had fallen, quietly, completely, for ordinary, honest Amaka. And Amaka, hardly daring to believe it, had begun, softly, to fall back. But Ikenna had already been claimed, my people, not by his own heart, but by another woman's ambition, and her name was Bisola. Bisola was everything the world of that city worshipped. Beautiful, expensively, deliberately beautiful, the kind that is assembled every morning and maintained at great cost, rich, sharp, glamorous, and underneath all of it, hollow in a way that no amount of gold could fill, and hungry in a way that frightened even her friends. Bisola did not love Ikenna. I want to be very clear about that, because it is the black root of this whole tree. She wanted him. She wanted the match, the alliance, the crown of being the woman who landed the man everyone wanted. To Bisola, Ikenna was not a heart to be won. He was a title to be seized, and she had considered it settled, her due, her destiny, long before a fabric seller ever made him laugh. So when Bisola learned that the great Ikenna, her Ikenna, was crossing a market for a nobody in a fabric shop, that his eyes had gone soft for a girl with no money, no name, no connections, nothing but a warm face and an honest laugh, something in her did not break. Something in her decided, and she did not decide alone. This is the part I need you to sit with, my people, because it is one of the ugliest truths this story has to teach. Cruelty rarely travels by itself. It gathers a court. Bisola had two who moved in her shadow. There was Kemi, loud, loyal, vicious Kemi, who had long ago traded her own conscience for a place near Bisola's warmth and would do anything, film anything, spread anything to keep it. And there was Titilayo, Titi, softer, weaker, a girl who had drifted into that circle out of a terror of being outside it, who did not have cruelty in her but did not have courage either, and who would learn, too late, that standing silent beside a wicked thing makes you its partner just the same. 3 women. One who hated out of ambition, one who hated to belong, and one who did not hate at all but was too afraid to say so, and together, in the poisonous privacy of Bisola's beautiful sitting room, they decided the fate of a girl whose only crime was being loved. At first, it was the ordinary weapons, whispers, lies dripped into the right ears. That Amaka was a schemer, a gold digger, a girl of loose character chasing Ikenna for his money. Bisola was certain it would be enough, that a nobody, shamed and slandered, would simply fall away. But it was not enough, because Ikenna knew Amaka's heart, and lies slid off it, and he only drew closer, and word reached Bisola that he was speaking of marriage, of bringing the fabric seller home to his people, of choosing her, openly, before the whole world. And that, my people, is when a jealous woman's ambition curdled into something with no name gentle enough to hold it. I will not draw the moment out, because it deserves no drama, only the plain and terrible weight of what it was. There was a party, a bright, crowded gathering, the very kind of glittering room this story opened in. Amaka was invited. She came in her best, glowing, happy, half-floating on the newness of being loved. And Bisola smiled at her all evening and drew her aside near the end to a quiet terrace with warm words and an apology on her lips. I have misjudged you. Let us be friends. Let me pour you a drink. And Kemi was there in the shadows with a phone already raised, because Bisola had ordered it filmed, a trophy and insurance, a thing to hold over the others forever. And Titi was there too, at the edge, seeing it all, her mouth opening to say stop and never making the sound. And Bisola took what was in her hand, a chemical, caustic, and cruel, the kind of thing that is thrown in that part of the world precisely because it destroys what a woman is valued for while leaving her alive to suffer the loss, and she threw it into the face of a girl whose only sin was to be loved by the man she wanted. I will not describe the sound Amaka made. Some things are not for telling. I will only tell you that a warm-faced, laughing girl walked out onto a terrace that night, and something else was carried off it, burned, screaming, her beauty and her old life gone in the space of 3 seconds, and that in the shadows a phone kept filming, and that a third woman stood frozen against the wall and did nothing, and would hear that silence of her own for the rest of her life. If you have ever been treated as though your entire worth lived in your face, as though you were a surface to be admired or destroyed and nothing underneath, type
More than a face.
in the comments, because that is the lie at the heart of what was done to Amaka, and this story exists to break it. And now, my people, comes the cruelty after the cruelty, because these stories are never only about the fire. They are about who runs toward the burning and who runs away. Amaka survived, barely, and at terrible cost, but she survived. And in the weeks and months that followed, she learned that the acid had taken more than her face. It had taken her world. The medical bills swallowed her aunt's small shop whole. The reconstruction she needed was a fortune her family could not dream of. And the man she had been burned over, where was Ikenna? Here is the first turn of the story, my people, and it is the one that took Amaka years to see the whole shape of. In the chaos after the attack, Bisola moved like a general. She had the lie ready before the ambulance was gone. The story that spread, carefully, expensively, was that there had been a shameful brawl, that Amaka was a woman of low character who had brought disgrace on herself, that the truth of that night was best not spoken of in decent homes, and Ikenna, devastated, disbelieving, kept away from Amaka's bedside by her own family's shame and by Bisola's whispers that Amaka did not want to be seen, was caught in the wreckage of it, and into that wreckage stepped Bisola, all comfort and calm, the steady, suitable woman his grieving family could lean on. Within the year, by pressure and alliance, and the sheer relentlessness of her ambition, Bisola had what she had maimed to get. She married Ikenna. And Amaka, the girl he had truly loved, vanished from that world entirely. Into a back room, behind a veil, into shame and silence and poverty, written off by everyone as a tragedy best forgotten. Gone. Finished. A cautionary tale whispered, and then not even whispered. Bisola had won. She had the man, the marriage, the crown, and she was certain, utterly, permanently certain, that she, Amaka, was a closed chapter, a burned page, a thing that would never trouble her glittering life again. She was wrong about that, my people. She was wrong in a way she would not understand for 10 long years. But we will come to that, because first I must tell you about the pit, and about the 2 people who reached into it, for it is always, always the same kind of person, and never the kind the world tells you to chase. For a long while, Amaka was simply broken. I will not dress it up, because there are people listening tonight who are in exactly that place, and they deserve truth and not a fairy tale. She would not look in a mirror. She could not bear the faces of strangers, the flinch, the stare, the turned-away child. The girl who had been found across a crowded market by her laugh now moved through the world, hidden, hooded, hunted by her own reflection. And the deepest wound was not on her skin at all. It was the belief, hammered into her by that fire and by the world's response to it, that she was now nothing, that her worth had been on her face, and her face was gone, and so was she. And into that darkness 2 people came. The first was her grandmother, old Mama Nkichi, who had buried a husband and outlived a daughter and feared nothing left on this earth, came and sat by her ruined, hiding granddaughter, and she did not weep and she did not flinch. She took Amaka's face, the new, changed, frightening face, in her 2 old hands, and she turned it to the light Amaka was hiding it from, and she looked at it for a long, long time. And then she said,
I knew you before you had this face. I knew you when you had no face at all. When you were a red and squalling thing 3 days old, and you were already everything you are. That girl is not on your skin, Amaka. She never was. They burned a wall of the house. They did not touch the one who lives inside it. And she is still in there. I can see her, looking out at me right now. And she is going to have to decide, my granddaughter, whether she will spend the rest of her life as a prisoner of 3 wicked women or walk out of this room and live. Because they took an evening from you. Do not let them have the 50 years that are still yours to spend.
The second was a doctor, a reconstructive surgeon named Dr. Adeyemi, who heard of the case through a charity, and who came not with pity, but with something far more useful, with work. She could not give Amaka back the face she was born with. She was honest about that from the first day, and Amaka would learn to love her for that honesty. But over years, over many hard and patient surgeries, she could give her back a face she could live behind. A face that was hers. And Dr. Adeyemi did something else. Something that turned out to matter more than any operation. One day, as Amaka wept that she would never be beautiful again, the doctor said quietly,
"You are looking at your face as the end of your story. I see hundreds of girls a year with faces like yours, burned by cruel men, by jealous women, by acid and fire and boiling water. And almost all of them disappear, exactly as you are trying to disappear, because the world has told them their life is over. Imagine if one of them didn't. Imagine what she could be for all the others."
and she let that seed fall into the dark soil of Amaka's ruin and said no more. If you have ever been written off completely, buried by people who were absolutely certain you would never rise again, type
She came back.
in the comments, because that certainty was the greatest mistake Bisola ever made, and the whole back half of this story is the answer to it. And Amaka rose, not in a day, and this story will not insult you by pretending she did. She rose the way real people rise from real ruin, slowly, painfully, one small refusal to die at a time. She let her grandmother's words and the doctor's seed do their slow work. She stopped hiding first for an hour, then for an afternoon, then for good. She went back to school, older than everyone, veiled at first and then not veiled at all. She worked, humble work, then better work, then work of her own. She had a mind, it turned out, that grief had not burned away, and a spine that the fire had, against all odds, only hardened. She started small, one honest venture at a time, and she was good at it, and it grew. Over 10 years, 10 years, my people, the exact 10 years Bisola spent believing her buried, Amaka built. A business, first modest and then not modest at all. A name, a life. But that is not the part of her rising that matters most. This is, she remembered the doctor's seed. And when she had risen enough to have a little power, she turned and reached back down into the pit she had climbed out of, for the others still in it. She founded something. A foundation, and then a clinic, for girls and women burned and scarred by cruelty, the ones the world was busy forgetting exactly as it had tried to forget her. She paid for their surgeries. She sat by their beds and turned their faces to the light with her own 2 hands. The way Mama and Keiichi had turned hers. She stood up in rooms full of powerful people, unveiled, her silver scars plain in the light, and she said the thing nobody in that world would say, that a face is not where a woman's worth lives, that the ones who burn faces are confessing their own ugliness, that no cruelty can reach the soul unless you hand it the key. She became, my people, a voice, known, respected. A woman whose scarred face was on magazine covers, not as a tragedy, but as a triumph, whose story lifted thousands of girls out of the pit she had once lain in. She turned the worst thing that was ever done to her into a lamp, and she held it up for everyone still in the dark. There was one girl in particular, my people, that Amaka always spoke of afterward. A girl of 16, burned by a man whose advances she had refused, brought to the clinic hooded and silent, having not spoken a word in weeks, certain her life was finished before it had begun, and Amaka did not lecture her and did not pity her. She sat with her for a whole afternoon, and then she reached out and did the thing her grandmother had once done for her. She took that frightened, ruined young face in her two hands and turned it gently to the light the girl was hiding it from and held it there and said,
Look at me. Look at my face. They did this to me too, 10 years ago, and told me I was finished. And here I am, holding yours in my hands. What they burned is a wall. The one who lives inside it, they could not reach. And they could not reach the one inside you either, unless you let them. So we are not going to let them. Do you hear me? We are going to walk you out of this room and into the whole rest of your life.
And that girl lifted her face on her own the next morning, the first time in weeks, and 2 years later, she came back to that clinic not as a patient, but as a volunteer, whole in the way that matters, to hold the next frightened face in the light. That, my people, is what Amaka did with her ruin. She made it into a hand that pulled others up. And here is the exquisite, quiet irony that the universe was building all those years while Bisola danced. The very fire that was meant to erase Amaka from the world was the thing that made her unforgettable. Bisola had tried to reduce her to nothing and had instead, with her own hand, lit the spark that made Amaka into someone the whole country would one day know by name. Had Bisola left her alone, Amaka would have been a happy, ordinary, invisible wife in a modest home. It was Bisola who burned her into a legend. If you understand that the deepest scars are the ones no one can see, the ones cruelty leaves on the people who commit it, type
The soul has no scars.
in the comments, because we are about to look, at last, at what those 10 years did to the woman who thought she had won. Because a prize seized by cruelty, my people, is not a prize. It is a sentence. And Bisola had been serving hers in a beautiful house for 10 years. She had married Ikenna, but she had never, for one single day, been loved by him. That is the second turn of this story, and it is the one Bisola built with her own hands and could never escape. Because Ikenna's heart had chosen Amaka, and though the lies had kept him from the truth, though he never knew what Bisola had done, some animal part of him always knew what he had lost, and some colder part always sensed that the woman beside him was not a refuge, but a trap he had stumbled into while grieving. He was courteous. He was absent. He lived in that marriage the way a man lives in a country he did not choose and cannot leave. And Bisola, who had maimed a girl to win this man, spent 10 years lying beside a husband who reached for her out of duty and never once out of love, and who sometimes, in an unguarded moment, said a name in his sleep that was not hers. She had the crown. And every day the crown reminded her that the head beneath it was one nobody had ever wanted. She had won the title and lost the only thing the title was supposed to bring. She was, in the deepest sense, the loneliest woman in Lagos, alone in a marble house, in a marriage to a ghost, surrounded by a court that feared her and did not love her either. And the court itself was rotting. Kemi, loyal, vicious Kemi, had spent 10 years as Bisola's enforcer and had received, in return, 10 years of being treated like a servant with a secret. The friendship had curdled into a cold war of two people who knew too much about each other, and Titi, soft, frightened Titi, had never recovered from the silence she kept on that terrace. It had eaten her, year by year. She had drifted out of the circle, out of the city, carrying that night like a stone sewn into her chest, unable to look at her own reflection, much as Amaka once had been. For cowardice, my people, leaves its own kind of scar on the inside where no surgeon can reach. This was the kingdom Bisola had built on a girl's burned face, a loveless marriage, a rotting court, a crown that mocked her. And into this kingdom, on the night of her grand 10th anniversary gala, walked a celebrated, serene, unrecognizable woman in deep forest green. The honored guest, the famous founder whose foundation Bisola's own charity had, without ever making the connection, invited to speak, the girl she had burned to ash. Come back. Now, my people, hear what Amaka did, and, more importantly, what she did not do, because she did not come back for revenge. I need you to understand that, because it is the whole difference between her and the woman who ruined her. She had known for years who Bisola was and what she had done. She had by then the fame and the resources to have burned Bisola's world down in return at almost any time, and she had chosen, again and again, not to, not out of weakness, out of freedom, because Amaka had learned the deepest thing this story has to teach. Her healing had never depended on Bisola's ruin. She had built a whole life, a magnificent life, without ever once needing to reach back and hurt the one who hurt her. She had walked into that ballroom not to destroy Bisola, but simply, finally, to be seen by her. To stand in front of the woman who had tried to erase her and let her existence be the whole of the message. You failed. I am here. I am whole. You were never the author of my life. You were a single terrible evening in it, and I have had 10,000 better ones since. And then she said her quiet sentence, and the glass shattered, and she turned and walked back into the party to give her speech, and left Bisola standing alone in the wreckage of a certainty 10 years old. But the reckoning, my people, the real reckoning, Amaka did not deliver. The universe did. Or rather, the truth did, the way truth always does when it has been held under water long enough. It came up violently all at once, and from the last place Bisola was watching. Because Titi was at that gala. Frightened Titi, who had carried the stone for 10 years. And when she saw Amaka stand up in that ballroom, scarred and unafraid and luminous, and heard her speak not of revenge, but of survival, of worth, of the soul that cruelty cannot reach, something in Titi that had been dying for a decade finally, at last, chose to live. She did not do it for applause. She did it because she could not carry the stone 1 hour longer. She stood in front of that whole glittering society, and she told the truth of the Terrace. All of it. And Kemi, cornered, terrified, and long done protecting a woman who had treated her like a servant, did the only thing left to save herself. She produced the video. The trophy Bisola had ordered filmed 10 years ago, as insurance against everyone else, became, in one night, the instrument of her own ruin. And it all came down, my people, all of it. In the space of a single evening, in the ballroom of her own triumph, Bisola's 10-year kingdom turned to ash. The way another woman's life had turned to ash on a terrace 10 years before. Except that this fire, Bisola had lit herself, patiently, over a decade, and simply never knew it was burning. Ikenna learned, at last, the whole truth of what the woman beside him had done, and the courteous, absent husband was gone by morning and did not look back. The society that had crowned her dropped her in an afternoon, and the law, my people, took an interest in a 10-year-old crime that finally, thanks to a coward who found her courage and a trophy that turned traitor, had both a witness and a tape. That is a justice no court alone could have designed and no vengeance could have delivered. It came from inside the very thing Bisola built. She had spent a wicked evening and 10 wicked years constructing her own scaffold, board by board, and calling it a throne. And here, my people, is the last thing Amaka did. The thing no one expected. The thing that tells you the whole measure of who she had become. When it was all over, when Bisola was ruined, abandoned, stripped of the crown and the court and the stolen husband, she came to Amaka, broken, at last, in a way that had nothing to do with any surgeon's work. She came expecting the killing blow. She came, I think, almost wanting it, because a clean act of revenge from Amaka would at least have made them equal, 2 women who destroyed each other, and would have let Bisola believe, in some corner of herself, that she had not been beaten by someone simply better than her. And Amaka would not give her that. Amaka looked at the woman who had burned her face off 10 years ago. Really looked. the way her grandmother had once looked at her, and she felt, to her own surprise, no triumph at all. She felt what you feel looking at something that destroyed itself trying to destroy you. She felt pity, and she said only this.
I did not come back for you, Bisola. That is the thing you never understood, not for one day of these 10 years. You thought you were the center of my story. You were a single evening in it. I stopped thinking about you a very long time ago, the day I understood that you had burned my face because you could not bear that I had something you could never buy, and that the most disfigured person on that terrace was never me. Look at your life. Look at what you did to it. I did not have to lift a finger. I only had to live.
And then she did the one thing that undid Bisola completely. The mercy that was heavier than any revenge. She made sure that Bisola's young daughter, an innocent child about to be crushed under the weight of her mother's scandal, was quietly given a place, a chance, a way through in Amaka's own foundation. Not for Bisola, never for Bisola, but because Amaka had sworn climbing out of her pit that she would never become the thing that pushed her in, and because the surest proof that the fire had not touched her soul was that she could hold out a hand, even now, even to the child of the woman who lit it. And then she went home, whole, free, unfinished with living. If this story reached somewhere real in you tonight, if you have ever been made to feel your worth lived in your face or your body, or been written off by people certain you would never rise, or carried a wound the world could not see, then do not leave this family without joining it first. Subscribe now, so the next story finds you the very night it lands. And tell me, in the comments, what city, what country is this story reaching you in tonight? From Lagos to London, from Accra to Atlanta, from Nairobi to New York. I want to see just how far this one has traveled. And do not go yet, because there is already another story waiting for you, right there on your screen. Another soul the cruel tried to erase, another fire that lit a legend instead. Because here is the truth I want you to carry home with you tonight, longer than any name in this story. They can burn what is on you. They cannot touch what is in you, not unless you hand them the key. A face is a wall of the house. It is not the one who lives inside. And the person cruel enough to destroy another's beauty is only ever confessing, in the loudest possible way, the ugliness of their own soul, for the truly whole do not disfigure others. Only the already disfigured reach for the acid. Your worth was never on your skin, my people. It was never on your skin. It is in the part of you that survived, that reached back for others, that refused to become what hurt it. Guard that. It is the one thing in this world that no fire can reach. Until next time, my people, wear your scars like the medals they are, for each one is proof of a thing that tried to end you and could not. Never let anyone convince you that your face is your worth. And remember, always, that the sweetest return is not revenge. It is simply to walk back through the door, whole and unafraid, and let them see that they failed.